Do you like to binge watch TV? Did you know you could binge listen to podcasts? Head over to electronicmediacollective.com, where they have podcasts for days. You like podcasts about wrestling? They have that. Do you like podcasts about TV and film? They have that. Do you like podcasts about horror? EMC has that too. Do you like comedy? Do you like books? Guess what? They've got you covered. Head over to electronicmediacollective.com. Pick your favorite podcast today.
You're listening to Moose's Monster Mash.
Welcome, Horror Hounds, to another all-new episode of Moose's Monster Mash. I'm your host, Moose. Before we get started, let me apologize for the delay on this episode. Full disclosure, health hasn't been the greatest, but not giving up. You know, we're going to ride this till the wheels fall off. Anyway, it's February. It's a time for love, time for romance. This February also happens to be the 95th anniversary of the release of Universal's Dracula movie. So that's what we're talking about. A 95-year history of Dracula. Now, you're probably wondering how many more times we can go to the well on this one. Well, you would be surprised. Honestly, there are well over 300 Dracula movies in existence, and if you combine that with TV, video games, and comic books, you're looking at over 700 media properties. And that's a lot. Don't worry, we're not covering all of them. Just going to touch on a few of them. We'll start our journey in New York, February 12th, 1931. Dracula opens. Small release. 2 days later, it gets its national release. Critical success. Dracula does so well, ultimately, Universal decides to move forward with Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man. Basically, Dracula was the start of the Universal monsters. And we're not going to spend too much time on this because, I have covered this in other episodes and you want to check them out, please do. But Bela Lugosi's performance of Dracula is still hailed as probably one of the best performances and most iconic performances of Dracula. He has more of a suave, debonair Dracula appeal to him. He's not super menacing, he's not off-putting, but he's just scary enough. And we'll more on this here in a bit. The thing that should be noted is that this was the first Dracula movie made with sound. So this is the first time any Dracula movie had any sound, talking, music cues, any of it, which you put it all together makes it a scary experience. It doesn't rely solely on just the actor's ability to portray a scary character. Looking forward to some of the other ones we're talking about. Christopher Lee, and I'm going to paraphrase here, once said in an interview roughly the same thing, that Lugosi wasn't a scary Dracula, and that he was disappointed in Lugosi's portrayal. It was ridiculous. He was too nice. He had no menace about him, and there was no shock or no fright to his Dracula. That's very opposite of what Gary Oldman, who played Dracula in Bram Stoker's Dracula, had to say, which was that he was very impressed. It's favorite Dracula. He said that Lugosi was really onto something. The way he moved, the way he sounded. When Oldman took on the character, he based his performance on, his vocal performance on Lugosi's voice, which has kind of become the standard for Dracula voices. It's that very often imitated voice. The other parts that come out of this were Lugosi helped set the stage for the black and red cape attire and just that overall look and vibe for decades. Let's jump ahead 27 years. we now have Christopher Lee taking on the role of Dracula in the Hammer films. Now, this one's different. It's different in a lot of good ways and some bad ways, but it's still a really good movie. Screenwriter Jimmy Sangster put the whole movie down to less than 90 minutes. He changed Harker into this character who's kind of like a hunter. He was going to go and he was set on his way to destroy Dracula. So at this point, we're already differing from Bram Stoker's novel. Made some other little changes. Notably, the bigger changes he made were to keep this movie grounded in realism. Which, you think, it's a vampire movie, why would it be grounded in realism? But you got to remember, vampires have been around a lot longer than Dracula, so it's everybody's folklore. Every culture has vampires. And that's why in this movie, you don't see Dracula change into a wolf or a bat. You just see, Dracula. If Sangster thought that him changing into animals made it seem more like a fairy tale rather than a realistic threat. And that's when, that's where Lee comes in, who does have this more menacing appeal to him than Lugosi did. And we're also in a different window of time for movies where you can be a little bit more intimidating. He gets to have fangs on screen for the first time. You get to see him bite people. There were actual deaths on screen. Unless I'm mistaken, one of the first times blood was splattered over the credit sequences. Lee's biggest regret was not being able to play Dracula as Stoker wrote him. He never got to play a story-accurate Dracula. Everyone, changed the scripts, put their own twist on it. And every one of his performances were great, but they were never, true to the book. And that was one of his biggest regrets with the character, was he never got to be that Dracula, because he was a fan. He read the book, and he thought he discovered something that most people hadn't noticed or hadn't decided to present, and that Dracula is, he's not necessarily a villain, but he's heroic, erotic, romantic, and he always tried to play him a little bit of sad. Just, he's lonely. And, we've talked about this on episodes before where Dracula is just kind of there. He doesn't want to live anymore, but he has to. He's this, at this point, he's this force of nature. Next one on the list is, I think, what most people would arguably describe as one of the greatest Dracula films of all time, and that's Del Toro's take on Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is fairly close to the book. Gary Oldman plays a phenomenal Count Dracula, and you see, you get an origin story, you get great cinematics, you get everything, including a love story that wasn't necessarily needed, but it was a fun twist. And mind you, these are just my opinions. You're more than welcome to have your own, and please share them. If we all agreed on everything, life would be boring. One of the coolest things from this movie is Dracula's armor. I don't know how to put it to words. It's just giant, almost wolf shape, but it's ribbed and not something you'd really seen prior. And it adds a really cool element and a new vibe to this old story. This is the first Dracula movie to ever win an Oscar, and what's interesting is, much like its 1931 predecessor, due to its production value and success, it led to production of 1994's, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, starring Robert De Niro, Wolf, starring Jack Nicholson, and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It kicked off a new age of the monster movies. And not only did this kick off an age of new monster movies, this also kind of kicked off the vampire and steampunk tie-in. It did have that very steampunky vibe. For this, it worked really well. And a couple of the cooler elements of this film were Dracula's transformation into the bat creature, into the wolf. And, the special effects were just phenomenal. And they were done using miniatures and just very traditional effect methods. And I think that's part of why this movie stands up so well. Now, the one thing I will say about this movie, and it's not good or bad, it's a way to make it longer. What I started doing is you'll start this movie, and then when you get to about the boat ride, you stop it, you queue up the movie The Last Voyage of the Demeter, watch that, and then pick back up where you left off on Del Toro's Dracula. Because Last Voyage of the Demeter does take a lot of cues from this movie. The bat creature is very similar. The character you see at the end of the movie is very reminiscent of Oldman's take as, young Count Dracula. It's just, they fit very well together, minus the fact that they're almost 20 years apart. Honestly, that's the amazing thing about the movies that we've talked about so far, is that they last really well and they hold up to time. I mean, like I said, Universals came out 95 years ago. We're still talking about it. Christopher Lee's came out in 1958. People still talk about it. Guillermo del Toro's came out in 92. People still rave about it. The reason I mentioned that all of these have lasting and staying power is the next one decided to bring Dracula into the modern world in Dracula 2000, which then spawns two sequels, making it a trilogy. I actually like the movie. It's a fun movie. Thieves steal what they think are riches. Turns out they steal Dracula. We meet the daughter of, I guess you kind of consider her Dracula's daughter too. It's Van Helsing's daughter, but she has the blood of Dracula because he was using Dracula's blood to keep him alive. So it's the daughter of Count Dracula and Abraham Van Helsing. What they ultimately tried to give this movie an edge seals this movie in a bubble. And this is a problem with with setting a film in any modern time. Now, the previous ones we talked about were all like Victorian, Gothic. You could play them at any time, and okay, they're set in the past. They're past, or they could be future, they could be alternate reality. It really doesn't matter. You get to Dracula 2000, it is very much America, the year 2000. It fell victim to the new millennium movies, all these other types of movies that came out right around 2000, where they all had that same feel, the same vibe, the new metal soundtrack, and it will forever be stuck in 2000. I mean, yes, that is the name, Dracula 2000, but it doesn't have longevity. It doesn't really have that ability to carry past, we're now 26 years later, you put it on everything is so dated. You don't feel that when you're watching the other ones, even though everything is super dated in the other ones. I don't put too much stake in what critics say, but there was a critic talking about this movie. What they said about it, it was harsh, but it also made me laugh. It was, of all the indignities to have visited upon Dracula during the past century, including being the inspiration for a serial and a Sesame Street character, and being lampooned by Mel Brooks, none is more unsettling than was what happened to the world's most famous vampire in Dracula 2000. I think Gerard Butler did a really good job as Dracula in this movie. I mean, he was sexy, he was menacing, there's a lot of action to it. I think ultimately what hurts this movie is, it's going to be stuck in the year 2000. Unlike Dracula 3000, I'm not talking about it in this episode, but Dracula goes to space. I said this was a 95-year history. Our journey started February 12th, 1931, and that brings us to February 6th, 2026, where Dracula from Vertical Entertainment is released in theaters. Directed by Luc Besson, starring Caleb Landry Jones, Christopher Waltz, Zoe Blue Siddell, and Matilda De Angelis, along with many others. The storyline is, in 15th century Romania, Prince Vladimir of Wallachia experiences the depths of all-consuming passion with his young wife, Princess Elisabeta. But conflict engulfs the region. The enemy is closing in on his castle, threatening to expand the Ottoman Empire into Europe. As Vladimir earns himself a horrifying nickname, irrevocable death robs him of everything, and forces the pained ruler to do the unthinkable, renounce his god until he brings his beloved back from the grave. 4 lonely centuries later, Vlad is now Dracula, an abomination condemned to wander among the living without the right to die. Doomed to suffer for all eternity, he seeks his lost half through time and eras, unaware that fate plays cruel tricks on mortals and immortals alike, longing to reunite with beautiful Elisabetta. The wait is finally over in dazzling Belle-Epoque Paris, with undying love as the ultimate prize. What will it take for Dracula to confront a supernatural expert determined to wipe his vampiric curse off the face of this earth? I mean, come on, guys. Sounds like we're starting fresh again. I haven't seen this yet. I'm hoping to go see it in the next week or so. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. It sounds really cool. Sometime in the future, I will probably dive more into some of the movies that I talked about on this episode. But this is a brief 95-year history of Dracula. Talking about some of my favorite films. Let me know your favorite Dracula movie. Just what's your favorite, what's your least favorite. And you can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com, and be sure to follow me over on Facebook at Moose's Monster Mash and YouTube at Moose Media Inc. Leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite Dracula movie is. And I can't wait to see what's next for the Lord of the Undead. Until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.